I'm on my own, broken and alone. I feel the rain crashing down all around this empty town. I'm searching for the lost and found, but you don't care, you're unaware. Keep moving like the scars aren't even there. It's in the air like a blazing flare. Just stare, 'cause the flames will burn us. I thought you were the one for me. That's why I gave you everything. Held you close by the stormy seas. Oh, you meant the world to me. I used to kiss your head when you cried for me. Hold your hand while the pain was over. Keep you warm by the roaring sea. You meant the world to me. Oh, you meant the world to me. Oh, you meant the world to me. My darling dear, you're never here. When I'm in pain, you hide and disappear. Like shadows in the atmosphere, charting the stratosphere. Yeah. I prayed for you and kept you near, in hopes you'd chase away my fears. I'm on my own, you made it so, and now I'm chasing nightmares too. I used to run with you through the great big leaves, laugh at you when you laugh at me. Hope for us because I believe the home was just you and me. I thought you were the one for me. That's why I gave you everything. Held you close by the stormy seas. Oh, you meant the world to me. Oh, you meant the world to me. Oh, you meant the world to me. Oh, I'm gonna do this on my own. No point in blaming you, you did not know. Oh, I thought you were the one for me. That's why I gave you everything. Held you close by the stormy seas. Oh, you meant the world to me. Oh, you meant the world to me. Oh, you meant the world to me. Oh, I'm gonna do this on my own. No point in blaming you, you did not know. Oh, I'm gonna do this on my own. No point in blaming you, you did not know. I thought you were the one for me. That's why I gave you everything. Held you close by the stormy seas. Oh, you meant the world to me.
Slowly but surely, so please get around, take your seats. Grab a cold one. Sit still, a cold one. And crack on. So, thank you guys everyone who have made it today. Despite the agenda changes that unfortunately we react to. And talking about today's agenda, we have two talks as usual. As Waymo is kindly hosting tonight. The first one is by Waymo's very own Alexander Parshen about writing framework agnostic code. Funny thing that Waymo is kind of company that is locked to Magenta framework. That would be especially interesting to hear about that. Another one supposed to be one by Kirill Solovyov. If anybody knows Kirill Solovyov, not much, some. Okay. Who was unfortunately unable to make it here tonight because he got sick. So we rescheduled his visit to summertime. So he'll be in July, so stay tuned with that. We had to apply some DevBot magic here and exchange one key with another one. So DevBot, very own Kirill is talking about GDPR. You probably received a bunch of emails from different services during this week that, okay, we update our terms here and there and this and that. Yeah, that's all related to GDPR. Yeah. Who knows what's GDPR? What is GDPR? Like who knows it's so clear that it's not a problem to like implement fixes to your production system. Well, some of you. Okay, so there's some useful information for the rest of us. Great to hear. Talking about sponsors once again, we have a bit of changes on the sponsor board. The one who made previously Move Guides has now transitioned to Utopia. That's actually the very same company. And we're happy that Gamesys also joined our sponsor board. That's their first sponsorship month. They do iGames development. That's a fancy name for game education. So I want to invite to the stage Waymo CTO Wilco in-house to have a welcome word, and after that Alexander will crack on with the first word for tonight.
Okay. Hello, I just don't really want to steal much time, just briefly talk about the company visited today, us, Waymo. Just so you have a bit of background about us. We were founded in 2008, and that means we're having our 10th anniversary this year. And the first office, we were actually founded in Sweden by 3 Swedes, 2 of them Samis, and it's not quite clear if that's Swedish or not, but anyway. But it was basically founded in Stockholm, and the Italian office was the first office outside of Sweden, first international presence.
So the coincidence that why you want to change white?
It is not a coincidence, maybe more than an accident. At the time when we were founded, we were actually called iCommerce. And iCommerce, when we started going into more market, iCommerce ended up being a very common name. So we were trying to find a name that is specifically uncommon, but short, easy to pronounce, has lots of vowels, sounds nice. And we found a name that meant absolutely nothing anywhere. We just didn't check Finland. Anyway, So the first international office was here. Since then we've been expanding quite a bit, so we're quite an international company. I think we have now 13 countries with 15 offices, or 15 offices around there. But we're also within each office, we're very, very international. I think in this office here we have something like 12 nationalities. And but anyway, what we're really all about is we say we're driving success in digital commerce. That's mostly e-commerce, but of course that goes beyond the e part these days. And so we focus on a single product, Magento, as our e-commerce platform, but we have surrounding services around that, from strategy to design to everything. And internally we also have a hosting team, so we actually host the product for essentially all of our customers. We have an internal product development team, an internal tools development team. So we're basically all around the services and technologies around digital commerce. But I think that's pretty much it about us. I hope you enjoyed today, and I'll call on Alexander, our own Alexander, to start the first topic. Welcome.
And people who are standing, there's so many rooms in front, so like when you want to be close to the view.
I mean, that's fine, you're still allowed to stand there.
Hello, my name is Alexander. I work here in Weimar, and as Stanislav said, it's quite funny that I will talk about being framework agnostic while working in the company that is so tightly coupled in Magento. Actually, in two Magentos, Magento first and second one. Okay, but just to start, let's go through a quick overview of PHP frameworks maybe more. Okay. Okay. So, oops. Oh, okay. Okay, let's do history. How many PHP frameworks do you know? 5, 10, 20, lots of them. There are actually lots of them. And let's go back into 10 years. The most popular ones of those days are Symfony one, then Framework one. One, two, three, four. That's better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Should we start from scratch?
We good?
Okay, sorry about that. We've got CodeIgniter those days, and Magento 1 was released almost 10 years ago on top of then Framework 1. And speaking of today, every single framework from those days is really dead now. Now we have Symfony 4, which last complete rewrite with almost 8 years ago. We have Zen Framework 3, Magento 2, Laravel, which is a new star, and it's just a bunch of Symfony components with a flavor of Ruby on Rails. And now, era of micro frameworks started. We have Salix, Slim, actually really 1,000 of them. And what we can talk about the future, what will happen with those frameworks in 10 years, actually, not precisely, we cannot predict anything else that every single nowadays popular framework will be dead. And this talk is about what we would do with this fact that everybody dies, including frameworks. Okay, the first option how to deal with dead one is try to reanimate it, maintain it, its infrastructure yourself. That was what I was doing for Symfony for 4 years. We had to fork almost every community plugin we needed to use. We created Composer plugin, we created a plugin to install Symfony's plugins using Composer. It was really lots of job, but we had to do it just because all our application code was tightly coupled with Symfony 1, and it wasn't that easy to re-implement all the stuff on top of Symfony 2, for example. The second option is just don't care, that one is still one. That is what I did in my another previous job. We started application on top of really ancient framework. It was obsolete even when we started. Oh, that's much better actually. I can hear myself. Okay, what I was talking about dead ones. Okay. This one was really dead. It was super old, but I actually don't know why they started an application on top of it. I joined a bit later, but it was the fact, the thing which we should work with. It was really old. It was full of singletons and this messy spaghetti code like everybody writes in his first days. Yeah, it was really amazing. But what I started doing there, I started just grabbing cool components from Symfony 2, which became matured this time, and one component from Laravel, and I built the whole Frankenstein from those components just to ease my own life. But I realized that I made the life of other developers a bit more hard, because they now need to learn all those new things. And after that I just started counting, and I think it would be maybe less expensive for the company not to build this Frankenstein, but re-implement the whole thing, which is the third option. This one is dead, give me another one. That is usually funny for us as developers. Every developer, I think, wants to re-implement the whole application he works on, just because now he knows better how to start it, because of his experience working on it. And maybe you mentioned that all three options are not good at all for the company, actually for everybody who is involved. And is there any way to avoid this? And yes, there is a way, and this is what my talk is about, actually. And let's start from a bit of example. The task is pretty simple. We need to create a feed of products available in our store and send it via FTP as a CSV document. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward with the action from 3 steps: fetch list of products, then convert them into a stream of CSV, and then just send it. The code is this simple. I don't want to reinvent those wheels, so I just grab a CSV library from League, just use a Magenta products repository, and just use a Magenta bundled FTP client, which has this pretty strange name. I use dependency injection to inject all of those classes into the class. And the whole action is that simple, only 3 lines. It's pretty cool, pretty straightforward. It's easy to read. My code is clean. My life is beautiful. You know, I just solved the use case of the client with only 3 lines of code. But
and you did it with PowerPoint.
Yeah. Okay. But the problem is that what I actually did, I created a tightly coupling between my use case, which is just products export, to this FTP thingy. I don't know how it works, how it should work, how often it changes, but I have this tightly coupling, and it is still okay in this small schema, but the problem is that almost every single project has many of those exports. For example, we have an export with to client's ARP, to recommendation system that will recommend users something to buy. And so that we will end up with lots of those classes, and all of them will be dependent on this FTP class, which is not that cool now, because what if I told you, oh no, now you're just trapped with this dependency, because it's started being not that easy to change it. It will be lots of places when you need to change only one thing. And what if I told you that FTP is not good enough as a transport protocol? You have a secure FTP now, which is much more secure, you know. So, okay, there is a solution for it. It's called dependency inversion, and it is a part of Solid. Maybe you know what Solid is.
Who does know what Solid is?
Okay.
Okay. Should be way more advanced.
Yeah, probably. Okay, the idea of principle itself is quite easy, and the idea is to split your task, your module, into several layers, into several layered sub-modules, and define relationships between those layers. And the first part of these relationships is that easy. High-level modules should not depend on low-level modules. Both should depend on abstractions. What it means in our case that we have FTP, CSV writer and repository as low-level modules, and our use case as a high-level. And the problem is that our module directly depends on low-level modules, like FTP, for example. I will talk about FTP more. So it's time to fix it. That is a class diagram of the implementation of this fix. We introduced this FTP client interface, which is a part of the module now. We have this Magento FTP client, which is just an adapter for Magento FTP thingy. So our module now contains of those export classes and FTP client interface. The most important thing in this schema actually is this arrow between Magento FTP client to FTP client interface. As you can see from directions, there is no direct way from export classes to FTP and vice versa. And that is dependency inversion is all about. Okay, exactly the same thing in code looks like this, just pretty straightforward interface with only one function, and class Magento FTP clients that implements it. That's pretty straightforward, easy. But now we just decoupled our third party from our use case, from our application logic. That was the thing we tried to achieve. And the next part is about naming. Actually, abstractions should not depend on details. Details should depend on abstractions. It sounds messy, but actually it's all about naming. Naming matters here, and what it means that the name of our abstraction of this FTP client interface, I called it previously, should be explicit enough just to define what the implementation of interface should do, but should not be that explicit to restrict implementation. It should not contain any implementation details like FTP client. FTP is implementation detail. Our product expert don't want to know how this content should be delivered. Only thing it needs something to deliver. So, for example, transport interface is much better naming, because what actually this class needs, only transport, only something that delivers your content, and that's it. So I renamed transport FTP client interface to transport interface, and Magento FTP client to FTP transport, just for consistency. The same thing in code looks like this, almost the same as previous example, but with a bit different naming. Which is what is not clear from these slides probably, that this interface, transport interface, is a part of your module namespace, not something else, not Magento, not some adapter or third party or whatever. It's a part of your application. That's really important. And that means that we are actually finally free from one of our dependencies. I don't repeat the whole process for two left. So it's time to go to next level, which is generalize the concept from module level to the whole application. And there is another concept, which is hexagonal architecture. It was introduced by Alistair Cockburn almost 15 years ago, and usually it sounds like this. I will read it. Create your application to work without either UI or database, so you can run automated regression tests against the application, work when database becomes unavailable, or just switch databases, and link applications together without any user involvement, which basically and usually is illustrated like this. I don't know why hexagon actually, but maybe I have an answer for this question, but I don't know why Alistair chose hexagon, but that's it is the application is your domain logic, your classes, your repositories, your logic, business logic of your project. This adapters layer is very thin thing that just encapsulates application from framework and vice versa. And framework encapsulates all in layers from wild internet, as I call it, and I mean every single thing you just don't want to be aware of while developing applications. Some databases, file systems, HTTP itself, everything. You just don't need it to model some business process. You can imagine framework as another boundary, like if you have an application, you can imagine framework as a boundary of this application, like exactly the same way like databases, like file system, like almost every EO. Basically, it just provides you a handful of tools to abstract from those things and request response machine. That's it. Framework is just a layer, not a thing that you should use in your code directly. And as an example, that is, do you know Symfony? Who knows Symfony? Okay, that is pretty simple and pretty straightforward. Symfony controller. We have only 10 lines of code, and we have 4 dependencies here. It extends a Symfony-based controller. It gets a request class from HTTP Foundation component, and it uses Doctrine to get some documents from database, and it uses templating just to render a template. Those dependencies are wrapped in this render function and this getDoctrine function. But actually what it needs only a way to get users from the database or whatever, and it needs a way to render stuff, nothing else. So we can rewrite it a bit, extend from our own controller just to get a bit off from framework, which we don't use anymore in the code. Inject users repository, which was extracted from Doctrine. It's just an application level repository that uses Doctrine inside, but don't allow you to talk Doctrine directly. And this engine interface is what is hidden by this render. So our function become much shorter. It's just finds active users from a repository and sends it into a template, which renders a response. That's it.
Question: what object does this render response returns? Should return your own class then? Yes.
Yep.
The framework it should inherit the framework's class, so you can change it later.
Yeah, I will talk a bit about it a bit later, but as for now, it's enough that we use a framework only as a request response machine. We get request and create response, and that's it. We can abstract of it too, but I will talk about it a bit later. Okay, so being agnostic about whatever out of your boundaries gives you amazing freedom of choice of implementation, those details. You can switch from one database to another. You can switch from MySQL to MongoDB, for example. You can switch Doctrine to Propel if you need really, but I don't like this idea actually. But it requires trained common sense. Sometimes you just don't need it, and frankly speaking, you almost, not always, but often you don't need it. But if you have a really huge application, this abstraction matters. And to sum everything up, I will try to formulate those principles of being framework agnostic. And first one is explicitly define your boundaries. They call it hexagonal architecture. The idea is what I was talking about a couple of minutes earlier. Just define boundaries from your application and guard them. Examples of those boundaries are file system, database, time. Almost every developer forgets about time. That time is a boundary too. Like for example, if you have a ticket selling system and you need expiration time for them, and if you want to test it, if you want to test that ticket really expires in 10 minutes, your test don't want to wait for 10 minutes. You need a clock to move arrows, and that's it.
End of month.
Yeah.
Are you going to really wait for end of month?
Yeah. EO. Every EO is a boundary. HTTP is just an EO, and it is what you was talking about, that I personally tend to abstract from HTTP request and response in my controllers too, because and move all this conversion logic into another layer just to get request module, which contains only the data I need in this controller to pass deeper in my application. And so I usually prefer to return some object, not a response. And you can imagine other parts of your domain logic as boundaries as well. And when you define those boundaries and you implement those adapters between these pieces of your application, it's much easier to manage the application itself. It's much easier, for example, to split your Behemoth application into microservices. You just need to re-implement those interfaces via HTTP, and that's it. So if you have a Behemoth and you don't know how to split it into microservices, just hexagon it first. It will help. The second principle is rely on abstractions, not on implementations. They call it dependency injection. And as an example, I will return to this FTP client interface and transport interface. This one is much better just because of naming. It's more abstract. It does not reveal any implementation details, just because if you, for example, if you want to send this CSV document as an email, it would be quite interesting thing that class email implements FTP client interface. It even sounds disgusting. But class email implements transport interface, sounds okay. That is thing. Another thing is depend on only what you need, really. They call it common sense. And as an example of this, we can again return to this thing about products export. And when we started, we injected products repository directly, which is a really huge class. It contains almost 1,000 lines of code, but we need only one piece of this, only one tiny function, getList. And I always prefer to extract this logic into a separate class, create my own products repository, extend or inject original one, and then create a function that will do exactly the same thing, but this class will now be in my domain logic. It will just use Magento, and it will reveal only what other parts of the module need, not the whole repository. Hmm?
Sorry, you mentioned the extension, the parts that you need, but your example doesn't.
It was my mistake. I'm just a bit nervous. You don't want to extend something, almost always. This thing is almost only PHP related. If you guys work on Java or another compiled language, you just don't know about it anything. Just compile it, don't allow you to do it. But in PHP we can break interfaces. Like we injected an interface into some class, and we know that implementation of this interface has some more public methods in it, and we can just use them without any warnings, notices from the language. Please just don't do it anymore, ever. Because what you are doing here is you discover that abstraction behind this interface you injected is leaky for your code, and you're hiding this discovery, which is usually good for your application, because if you have leaky abstraction, you have an option to improve it somehow. And if you don't, you will just leave it as is, and it will, maybe sometimes it will spoil your life a bit later. For example, when you start re-implementing this interface, again inject another class, and then you discover that, oops, I needed this function, and it could be quite problematic for you. And that is actually it, what I wanted to talk about. That is a reading time section. I usually create those slides like the first link is a list of Uncle Bob's papers about object-oriented design, including Solid, which I think almost every developer should know what it is. And the second link is an article to Alistair's article about hexagonal architecture itself. It's written in quite complicated language, but the most useful thing in this article is the last one, further reading section. He has really lots of interesting links in this article too. So that's it. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
What if I tell you that the regular lifetime of an application is around 5 years, so it's totally fine, depending on the libraries which will die, its applications will die?
The problem is that you don't know when your framework will die.
Like, you can support it like for 1 or 2 months, because the point is I was working once in a project where hexagon architecture was in like in Zillion grade.
Yeah.
And you have to go through 6 interfaces until you get to utilities. And if you need to change, add some form, you just go there, and it's so frustrating. Just, you know, it's a good idea, but like sometimes it gets really obscure, and people just read the book and say it. And now I got it, interface.
Yeah.
That's an answer.
That's why I told that almost always you just don't need it. You need it only in really huge applications.
That wasn't small. And how do you decide once we need it?
That's a good question. And it's a matter of common sense again.
Everyone has its own, like how you decide.
Yeah. I usually start writing the code from tests or from interfaces, and then I delete unused ones. By unused, I mean the interfaces that has only one implementation, and there is no stub for this interface. So if you have this video implementation, you just don't need an interface.
But in order to write tests, you still need to provide interfaces.
Usually, but not always.
But well, more often than not. Or
If it is your boundary, again, you need you need an interface.
stub it out. In order to stub it out, you need to provide interface.
Yeah, but if this thing is not a boundary of your domain, you can just provide object. You don't need to mock it. You don't need to create a stub.
Yeah, that's kind of work. Any more questions?
Everything is clear.
Alexander, you made it so clear.
Thank you.
Let's ask one question to the audience. Who uses this principle at work? Solid? I mean, like solid as described by
Inversion of control or dependency inversion. Good for you guys.
Who doesn't? And why? Can you explain why?
Can you explain why it's needed?
Functional programming.
I couldn't figure out why it's needed. Measure the cases.
Okay.
Imagine you now need to send over your reports not via FTP but via email, or put them to Amazon S3. So then basically you need to change every part of application where this logic is executed. That's why.
I know, I've been using it in another project, but it was used all over the place, like to the extreme. So I use it enough so I know how it works. The question is like, do you need that most of the time? You can use it without it. Because if you have too much inversion of control, the difficulty is understanding which interface, as was explained, is used, where is the implementation is. Because if you have too many abstractions, it's difficult to find.
That's another point Kirill explained, is that like the truth is where common sense is, so it's somewhere in between as usual.
Yeah.
But that's a pretty good point. Thank you, Alexander.
Yeah, for discussion.
Yeah.
That's a good thing for discussion.
Yeah.
Yep.
Give me a second.
I have a question.
Yeah, another question, please.
Yes.
What agnostic is all about here? In my opinion, agnostic works relates to religion.
Agnosticism is a term, is actually about you accept something, that something exists, and you don't need details. Okay, it exists. I'm okay with it. That's why that is how you are okay with framework. It exists somewhere around your application. That's why agnostic.
You are not reliant on the system, it's not your truth, and you don't give a shit if it's replaced, it's just your open free interface.
So this unfolds the meaning of word agnostic.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Alexander.
Thank
That's
you.
for you.
Thank you.
Now we have a short break.
Living in the same routine, like the seasons are long repeat.
Without the joy, you're signing.
It's a long way down.
See you tomorrow. Have a beer.
Trying not to follow suit. Don't like the color, I'll change the shade of it. I'm not afraid of it. I know know I'm holding on to this, holding on. Don't let me repeat it. Don't let me repeat it. Fast forward a year or two, friends have changed, but so can you. So can you. For too long about the mistakes, while I resent, I learned to hate. Forgot your names. Fear the struggle to follow on. Need to focus to prove you're wrong. I'm not wrong. I know I'm holding on to this, holding on. I know I'm holding on to this, holding on. Don't let me repeat it. Don't let me repeat it.
The fire makes the city look so bright. Close your eyes and just stay tight. We have to go. Stay with me while we leave. Don't worry, just believe me. This journey will relieve us. Stay with me while we leave. Stay with me while we leave. Don't worry, just believe me. This journey will relieve us. Stay while we leave. Stay with me. Stay with me while we leave. Don't worry, just believe me. This journey will relieve us. Stay with me while we leave. Stay with me while we leave. Don't worry, just believe me. This journey will relieve us. Stay with me while we leave. Stay with me.
Where do you go when you're young, when you're restless, when you're fun, cause you're desperate? Oh, here they come for a chance, for adventure. What's your poison? What's your pleasure? Oh, my city, she never sleeps, my city, she never weeps, my city, she keeps me alive. Give it up for my city, oh, oh, give it up for my city. has come. We must never stop the way. Birds jumping and I hear my name, grasping into life. Life is happy but it's so insane. We must merely make a start. Savannah, I'm coming home. Savannah, we'll never be alone. Savannah, the beauty of the world. Savannah, let's all take a walk. Savannah. Lion's gonna come. The birds have just begun. We will always take a stand for the people, for the land. Let's go back to when we were young. For the animals we stand. Let's go back to when trees were swung. Kids across the land. Savannah, I'm coming home. Savannah, we'll never be alone. Savannah, the beauty of the world. Savannah, let's all take a walk. Savannah, I'm coming home. Savannah, we'll never be alone. Savannah, the beauty of the world. Savannah, let's all take a walk. Savannah, I'm coming home. Savannah, we'll never be alone. Savannah.
When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Earth from a bird's eye view. You should grow feathers and see this too. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Clear want to get off that darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Earth from a bird's eye view. You should grow feathers and see this too. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Clear
Like the attention, girl, I know you. But you're everything I want in life. We're fighting danger like Kung Fu. The love I feel is deep inside. The others don't matter. It's honestly us against the world. We're the perfect team. You're my dream, but I just want it.
Can you see myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? See myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? See myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? See myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself?
Oh baby, if you ever need a helper, you should know that I'll be there day and night. Nobody else can love you better. I'm here just to treat you right. You're the reason I'm alive. You're the only pain I can endure. And when you're not here, you're my dream, but I just want it. Yeah, I just wanna. You're my dream, but I just want it.
Can you see myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? See myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? See myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? See myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself?
But I just want it.
Deep inside I knew from the start, you my bunny, I'm your Clark. From now to eternity I give you all my heart. We are meant to be, it's clear to see. My love is bigger than I thought. I got everything I want when I hold you with my arms. Yeah, this don't matter, my love and my pleasure, the key to my treasure. Whatever's the weather, day up and night with you till I die. How many times for you I'ma try? Want you to notice the one and I know this. Perfect soulmate, I wanna show it my best friend. She saved my life, my happy end in hard times.
Oh baby, hug it to myself, hug it to myself, hug it to myself. I just want it.
Can you see myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? See myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself?
Okay.
Can you see myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? See myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself? Can you see myself?
Oh baby,
Don't you know? Don't you know? I'm living in shadow. Don't you know? Don't you know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? You were fool's gold. Yes, I did. And I did it all for love. Yes, I did it all for love. Oh, they say fools believe in it, so I guess I'm one of them. Don't you know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? I fell for fool's gold. I fell for fool's gold. What did I know? What did I know? You were fool's gold. Yes, I did.
GDPR, impedance, and by the way, we have some free Docker swag from last Dev Club semi-private Docker event. Some t-shirts, available sizes L, and XL and S. So they will be over there after the talk. So if you want some, then go grab some. And round of applause for Kirill.
So what should I say? It's really pity that Kirill didn't make it. So we thought, okay, when Kirill's, no one maybe mentioned that would be a different one. So who've seen my presentation about this topic before on Russian Dev Club? Okay, couple of. That's good. There are some things changed or updated, I would say. First of all, template. Because Move Guys doesn't, as a brand, doesn't exist anymore. Now it's Topia. There is one more thing to come, and today I'll also be not alone, but accompanied by a couple of gentlemen who know some GDPR stuff better than I do. who is Wilco, CTO of Waymo, who is expert in GDPR. Can I call you like that? Just not. Okay. And we have one officer in here, DPO, Data Protection Officer, of Zone.ee, who basically also knows something about GDPR. So if I'm wrong, they correct me.
They throwing you.
Yeah, just don't, with shoes, yes. If you think I'm wrong, you can do the same. If I miss something important, because I just, I have only 40 minutes and I cannot talk about everything which is in 88-page A4 document, and if you still think it's important, just do it. So, the ones who don't know about GDPR, do you think that GDPR and kittens are connected? Just raise your hand who thinks they are. GDPR and kittens. No?
In the European Union will kill a kitten if you violate GDPR.
Okay, 2 persons, 3, 4, oh, the number is growing. I stand here for 40 minutes and it's already 40. Actually, if you Google, and you put Google GDPR and kitten, you see quite some results. Because like Google suspects something. But what is GDPR? Let's start from scratch. Stands for General Data Protection Regulation, like really bold name, still made for European Union, still affects the whole world somehow, still replaces old 30 years old regulation. So like there is a regulation about data protection, quite old, which has been released for people with no phones, no internet, or like wide internet access, for people who didn't have so many footprints of their activities in internet. It took 4 years to compile, so people worked hard, as I said, 88 pages, so it's quite some. Effective in less than 1 month. Are you ready? And game changer for IT industry. Really big change for IT industry, I would say. Well,
sorry to interrupt. Who thinks their company is ready already for GDPR? Okay, Waymo is ready.
like not everyone in Waymo is sure they're ready. Yeah. That's good.
Part of Waymo is ready.
And interestingly, because people who compile GDPR are not IT experts, in these 88 pages you will not find clauses like use Waymo because they use Magento and they're doing fucking awesome job on that. Unfortunately not, right, Wilco? You can confirm that. It's also, they don't say like use solid principles in order to do stuff. Also not. So there are like a whole bunch of things you can interpret in one or another way. And let's discuss that.
Does it affect Russia also?
We'll talk about that as well, my Russian friend. So, are you ready? And that question you asked, like only Waymo, like few people from Waymo said they're ready, no one rest did. We use trustful resources, which is Gartner, and Gartner says, still remind you that GDPR is effective in less than 1 month. Gartner says, by the end of this year, half of the companies will not be ready. And TrustArc says, like 61% not even started, and only 4% claim by they're fully compliant with GDPR. So, that's like Waymo, you are the best. At least half of you who raised a hand.
This is take it seriously.
Yeah. GDPR in short, from a user perspective, basically, people want to know, like, what data are you using? Like, my data? Like, what for? Show me my data. Like, what you're using for me. Can I fix it? I don't like it. Transfer it. Just people say, I don't like you. I just take all my data with me and carry it to a competitor. Please do so. It's also now possible with GDPR, like you do currently with telco. That's the idea. And the most famous one, right to be forgotten, or forget me. It wasn't me. But let's summarize it in one big bold statement. What GDPR is about, if you want to explain it to your grandma, is say, that about you, grandma, is your data and belongs to you. That's the point of GDPR. It's because people don't realize that with leaving all these footprints in internet, now you can steal your digital identity and pretend I'm you and do whatsoever. Like prior to that, you had to just do something with some documents or like official papers. Now you simply steal your digital identity and get a loan or get married to someone and things like that. So consent, or like my data, right? So your permission for data collection and processing, your permission, it's just not like someone forced you to do so, should be clear and visible with no predefined acceptance. So no checkboxes by default. So like just I leave my liver to you, or like oh my soul goes to you. And while I was doing that, I remember preparing this presentation, remember one case in UK when one company, gambling company, or publisher company, they had quite a big acceptance as big companies do with all this lawyer stuff. And the last acceptance was also checked by default that my soul goes to you. Also, I accept everything and my soul goes to you. And imagine what? Out of 6,000 people who've been shown that, only 300 unchecked the box, which is 5%. So like, and we've been expecting like a first person who realized that it just simply told to other person not to do so somehow, that actually maybe it was even less than 5%. So like people simply don't read all this text. And that's the regulation to avoid that. One, processing one consent, really interesting one. So by theory, if you collect email in order to send spam, and if you collect phone number in order to do password recovery, these are two different processes. So it should be two different consents, two different checkboxes, which are not checked by default. If you received emails previous week, big companies are also trying to be creative, and they actually pretend it's one process. So they somehow say like everything is about the customer, it should be one process. So you still, like in big companies, all this regulation, you put one checkbox, which really shaky topic. So according to GDPR, one processing, one consent. So I just have to be able to uncheck a checkbox next to my email, say I don't want to receive spam any longer, and that should work. I still can do password recovery with my phone number. So these are two different processes. And maybe the most important one, recall is same easy as accept. There used to be companies, especially in UK, when you can sign for the service and you should provide your credit card number, and you only be able to unsign with fax. And that's a real case. I know like it's like 1 or 2 years ago, it still used to be like that. No, if I do checkbox in the web, the same checkbox should be in the web. No fax, please.
But it doesn't concern the question of unsubscribing from a service. This is when you want to unsubscribe from something, because with a service we have some kind of contractual relationship, and as lawyers tell, the consent is the last thing you should be asking. Everything should be found possible before consent, and this is exactly what the big companies are doing with everything. They are changing their privacy rules, all of the declarative part, and working hard to use the part of the GDPR telling that you may need to have some kind of law-based requirement. You may have something related to the contract with your customer, or it might be your lawful interest to have that. If everything else fails, then you should go for the ticking of the box. So there is an important part of not messing the two things, and also the question about about using the phone number, for example, for account recovery and things like these. This case, I think, isn't exactly mentioned, but when you read the related documents, then, for example, related to, I think, all kind of, in other things also, like on the e-privacy laws, I know about cookies, the session cookies are okay, so we were in this case, there would be also lawyers looking for the ways to declare that as part of securing your business process and so on.
Yeah, like that just was an example. So like lawyers are always creative. I said like they are reading GDPR in their own way, not like developers do. So like they can have a shortcuts for that as well. And why it's needed? Because like I guess everyone knows this famous comics. Well, you want to install a browser, and there is a huge legal agreement. They said like, fuck, what could be wrong with that? You just press I accept it by default, and Mozilla now owns your house and everything which you owned, and you simply somewhere on the street because it doesn't belong to you. That's the idea is about. The consent, if something is important, you should know that like that will affect me, or that is needed for that reason, and it should be clear, visible, human readable language, not binaries, please, this time. And yeah, let's see what happens, what legal agreement with Firefox will be out after 25th of May. But you also should understand that not all data is equal. Racial or ethnic origins, political opinions, religious and philosophical beliefs, trade union membership, and so on, data concerning health, sex and sexual life is what?
Sensitive
Is prohibited for collection and processing. No, unless you manifestly make it public or state allows collecting that. What it means. So, for example, you should not make this thing in a social network. This stuff is mandatory for collection. But if, like, you can still make an input box for that. But if person enters with data, this data doesn't, like, it's, you're not only storing that to database, it means this person makes it manifestly public, so it becomes public in his profile as well.
So we are all waiting for this letter from Tinder, I think, where they ask them for the information to process our preferences.
Yes, so that should be manifestly public, and that is really interesting stuff. Or like a state allows collecting that, like for example for visas. Like if Visa needs anything of that, or that a state regulates that, it's state regulated, that's fine for collection.
What regions this GDPR applies? Does it apply to China and
we come to that.
Okay.
But what puts us on interest? Biometric data. And pictures of human beings belong to biometric data. What it means?
Is your age biometric data? This kind of measure here.
It's measuring you, but it doesn't identify you explicitly that you is you. So it actually means two things about talking about Tinder, which you use a lot. Because I have no idea how it works. I don't have it, you can check it. This means two things. If you force people to upload the real picture, and you actually check, for example, with machine learning, that that's a real picture of a person, and you will not allow to do any further if it's not. No, you should not force people to do so. Or, which is maybe even more tricky case, person uploaded a picture and you said, oh, you're a black kitten, you have long black hairs, maybe you want to have a date with a kitten, which also has long black hairs. Really tricky stuff. What it's needed? So like, actually you can ask for data we're using, like, okay, you use this data, what you need it? It helps to prevent this discrimination. And discrimination is mentioned in GDPR, I don't know how many times, like quite a lot. So that's why there's a right now given to you, even if you don't suspect that something is collected about you, which seems to be sensitive. You can ask which data is collected, and by observing that, to say, it looks like you are using some sensitive data, maybe you discriminate me somehow, maybe just because I'm black, you don't give me this these ladies to meet. That's what I meant. So yeah, I don't have black blonde hairs. So and funny thing about GDPR with IT guys, it also helps to reverse engineer processing algorithms. What you cannot do with GDPR is to ask people how you process my data. Like what exactly algorithms you're using. What you can do, you can find several volunteers, ask from your competitors what data you're using, then ask them to use, for example, the same procedure, for example, loan calculation. They have some result, and then using some machine learning or AI to understand how they process, that's the initial data, that's the outcome, how they could do that. So with quite some people, you can discover the recipe of guacamole. There's also two types of data besides sensitive or not sensitive. Manually inserted, so like what I did manually, should be easily accessible for review through user interface. So if I entered that data through user interface, I should be able to see that through user interface. Still, not by fax, please. And automatically collected, basically monitoring stuff, all these trailing cookies and things like that, should be provided on demand in the machine-readable format. And, again, important thing, free of charge, with an asterisk. What this could mean?
So if there's a premium service, for example, have a calendar feed or whatever, customized export of your data, can that be a part of a premium service, or should that be free also? Or
now, if data is collected from you, like when
curated, basically, if it's in a form that has value versus just a data dump of data. For example, your Facebook data, if your events won't be
that's additional service. Yes, you can charge for additional service, but like basic data, what is collected should be for free. So if person wants to have some extra on top of that, that's additional service. Yeah, like there was a question, sorry.
So I know that Slack collects the logs for conversations, and for free users, they limit to 10,000 last logs. Now, if I ask to retrieve once starting from 10,000, I should be able to retrieve them free of charge. Yeah?
Starting from 26th of May or 25th of May, yes.
Okay. And also if the messages you have been exchanging are with yourself, if it concerns other people, then they must meticulously remove the parts of the messages of other people.
Yeah. So yeah, in GDPR there is also collective ownership. So if data is concerned several people and something happens to this data, all these people should provide their concern.
Also, the free of charge. The main thing is that it's not free of charge if you think you can troll them every day.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yes. So free of charge means business idea, and business idea is like that. You have opened your profile one time for today. Next time you do so, you owe us $100 or euro, whatsoever, because GDPR says you can do. In GDPR, there's interesting clause on that. It says, first time, or at least like, it should be free unless, if it's on a repeatable manner, then, and it's not said like, what means repeatable manner? Maybe it's like from the second time, like, it says on a repeatable manner, you can decline a request, or you can ask money for that.
It's free at midnight. Okay, really?
But how can I prove that my customer has actually seen this request?
What do you mean seen this request?
Has seen the response.
Now,
you are allowed to verify that this is the particular customer, so you can have all of the auditing present. because you can't give the personal data out to somebody, the wrong person. You must protect it. So there must be.
So no torrents, please. Like just not.
There is strong authentication before you are going to give anybody out. If anybody wants, I can later show you one solution for a very nice non-connected validation, so you can do ID card logins over a phone calls and things like that.
Well, so if like the showing the data is the same sensitive as collecting the data. So for collecting the data, you use authentication, that kind of things. For showing the data, please do the same. Just not offload them somewhere to some free SharePig site and say like, here it is. Like it should be also through authentication and stuff.
Also, there is another part of the same business idea. There are NGOs and trade lawyer groups working already to start doing basically what could be denial of service attacks on organizations by asking massive amounts of data, like making a class action lawsuit to get data. And especially the part of what I commented related to Slack, that the information pertaining to other people needs to be removed. Then try to imagine an organization who has currently records in paper form. Like maybe we had a registration list for this today's event where everybody signed, and now somebody of you is asking for the copy of where...
Please another example, if possible.
No, we did for the Internet Day the similar example exactly with, and the Estonian Marketing Institute was able to provide photocopied lists of participants to the person who asked, with everybody else whited out. And I'm hearing that in large European organizations that have been on for years for serving these kind of things, people working with copy machines and white out. So please, if you are serving some kind of larger company, be ready, there will be trolls around, and be ready to help your customers to implement systems that are protecting against GDPR, DOS.
By the way, I remember on this Internet Day you actually asked from free organizations.
Yes, we asked for free organizations.
Do you want to name them?
There was the Marketing Institute that that sent a stack of papers that high, printed out all of the list of from MailChimp and everything. The second one was Tallinna Reaalkool, my school, which is still answered, and the third one was, I think, might have been Tallinna Kaubamaja. I'm not sure, but I think...
So you started to troll them pre-GDPR?
Yes.
And did they reply?
The Marketing Institute answered Kaubamaja and Reaalkool still haven't answered, and I just was talking to the girl we were using as the citizen asking for things last week, and she hadn't received any additional information. So basically,
maybe they shouldn't reply still. Yeah.
So yeah, as this slide in this discussion all leads into GDPR trolling, will we ever see, is there a time coming soon when we'll see a presentation about GDPR trolling and mitigation of such tactics?
Sure, because we have to live with that, and at some point we have to understand how to fight that law.
But from the behind, I think it was how, in the legal perspective, how do you validate that the user has received the data? If you have the GET request on your log, is that enough? Or does the user need to actually tick some box? Or
no, that's enough. So there is no confirmation on I've seen my data required. So it means like you've shown that and you assume that it's done.
So if the request is successful,
not
if it's partial.
In legal spheres, it's also told that when you're looking at US privacy-related regulations and different regulations, you are usually having specific rules. Like you must, with PCI compliance, you must basically check some boxes and say that I did that, I did that, I did that, I'm PCI compliant. With European law and GDPR, it is mostly telling that you must pay due diligence. How exactly, we'll later look, was it enough? So you have a lot of discretion in deciding how you are doing that. But if somebody comes to tell you that you didn't do well, then get a lawyer. So it is very amorphous, this question, and I've been on one of the first DPO trainings, and most of the work, especially because there are currently no cases based on GDPR, were based on European Court of Justice and Human Rights decisions. So basically interpreting the things from top of the Supreme Court and then trying to grasp the idea. So there is it is very deep. So understanding the concept of frameworks integration is peanuts with whatever level we need to go there. So basically it's like implementing your own multi-threaded processor course.
Okay, I can continue. So why you need to fix the data? Like if it's collected, we've seen that. So basically it's your right to influence the result of data processing. It's still not your right to provide incorrect data. Please provide still correct data. But for example, if you think that the fact that you've been into jail can affect your something, but in some cases you simply can't avoid providing that. And interestingly, it's don't forget that you have a right not to be a subject to a decision based solely on automated processing. So if no person prior making decision was affected, then you can say, I don't want to be part of that decision. And luckily, here in GDPR, some concrete examples, like loans, e-recruiting, and anything related to your performance at work, health, economic situation, personal preferences or interests, and so on and so forth. Again, if state or a job contract didn't allow that in advance. And we are interested in that, personal preferences. I guess a lot of people hate tracking. I just show that and you ask, right? Just an example. One guy had received an email from a company saying like it's nice to be in touch, and we are these guys, and just sent us email. And one good cooperation understood, okay, from the content that this thing is about, and show advertisement of a competitor right here in the email. So it's possible to opt out, or should be possible to opt out. Say like, I only want to see kittens, or like just generic stuff, don't track me. You had a question?
No, it wasn't a question, I just showed a thumbs up. Like
yeah. So, and you still hate this company, somehow. And you can ask them to transfer your data to competitors. Cool, right? Should they do that? Well, they can refuse if it affects currently their financials. They say like, oh, it's really expensive to do. One more try. Say like, forget me. And when it comes to that thing, it reminds me of famous MIB movie, when you just say like, I press the button, and you'll not remember a thing about me. Just I come to my bank and say, that's it. No loans, nothing.
But does that apply to metadata?
We'll come to that as well. So from IT reality, and let's read GDPR. The right to be forgotten, how it's called there, means your data should be detached from processing, including searching and displaying, and stays immutable. It's not about deletion. And it was a question whenever like I should delete all my archives. Like, what's the point of archive if you mute it? Like, there is no point of archiving. But there is one trick in GDPR. So it says as well that if you've been archiving stuff and then person wants to be forgotten, so you kind of like delete or whatsoever, do with him, and when your original data crashes and you restore from archive, then from a person perspective, he still uses his right. So it means that still should be forgotten. So there are some things which also affects us from IT perspective should be even more solid for your application. I know some companies are using Google spreadsheets for person who want to be forgotten because they rely on that more than their application. So I simply store IDs of a person which doesn't belong to personal data, so you can store some numbers somewhere and then said, okay, if I crash, I should validate that this person is still forgotten. And it also means it's okay to have soft deletes or pseudonymization and restrict data for further modification. That's the right to be forgotten from IT perspective.
Can you state the name of the person in a spreadsheet?
No, name of a person you cannot because it's a personal data. ID is not a personal data.
If it cannot be connected back to the person.
So it shouldn't be connected back to the person. Like
No, it's like ID still, like if by ID, looking on ID, you can identify the person. Like if your ID is not a random generated or auto-incremental, but your ID is Kirill, Linik, and social security number.
Not so much. But here's an example. Well, sorry, you go first and then...
Yeah, the point is, I don't have an ID, I don't have a name for the company, but I know it's a bakery company located on Goetze 8-4. So it's still identifiable information.
Now, we are not talking about companies, we're talking about people.
Okay.
And if, like personal address, a home address, is a personal information.
What if it's a baker number 4? That's the question.
It's baker number 4.
ID is baker number 4 is a personal data.
No, it's not a personal data because it can change. And if next, like looking on baker number 4, you cannot understand, or any other person can understand who is behind that, especially if that can be changed. So that's fine.
So an example, or kind of order case, maybe not so really ethical, but still. Imagine I'm a financial company that provides financial services to customers. For example, I allow people to create accounts, do transactions, and then reason about their behavior, right? For example, I'm a bank. And then a person, a customer, like wants to be forgotten. I cannot delete their transaction, but I can decouple their account, like kind of soft delete their account, decouple from their transaction, and give away the data. And then, when in case this customer signs back in, I really do care if this very same guy or not, right? And in theory, I am not really allowed to do.
In practice as well.
And what if?
No ifs, in practice as well.
What if? I know that this guy is probably coming back and he's speculating. So basically, he's kind of wants to flush his credit score or his behavior.
But how do you know he came back?
No. Let him finish.
I give him.
Like what you can do. As I said, initial data of a customer is not mutable. So if right to be forgotten is realized, it's not mutable. What you can do, you can somehow understand that that's a guy and copy the data to a new place and pretend that's a new guy.
So the way to understand this, that for example, while I still have access to his data,
yes,
I can encrypt it to a token and give him some promo code, like sign up with this token for a discount next time. And then when he signs up, I decrypt it to back his data. Okay, I know, okay, that's the guy. And then have instant access to his transactions. And then I understand, okay, that's the guy. Is it like kind of...
Like that's... You're really creative. That's cool. What I think you can do, it's also not really stated in GDPR. What I think you can do, yes, you can understand that that's the person you know, but you should not, again, change the original data. You can copy the data and act based on that.
I don't care changing the original.
Like, okay, so if you don't modify the data, that's fine.
I think one thing is in general, just as a general case, encryption does not get you away from any form of, it's the same, whether data is encrypted or not.
No. I mean,
So
like I only know token. I encrypt the data, store the token, and forgot the data. And then only when he provides the token back, I can decrypt it because I know decryption algorithm.
So if the token happens to be the only key, and you don't even have the key, then potentially you can get away with it. But just as a general, I would say that any form of encryption will not generally change the matter. Because, so you don't try to use it as a hiding technique or something.
And you're supposed to use encryption and pseudonymization in your technologies anyway, even when you are not forgetting. So
that's of course.
So learn cryptography, kids.
That has been. And don't forget to notify other third parties. Like if you collected the data and send it to someone else, and they're using that, and the person comes to you and say, I want to be forgotten, they just like try to do it as well. Notify them that that's the guy. And do it if it doesn't significantly affect your business. That's basically every second chapter in GDPR says like, well, you can do it, but like maybe not.
So if you don't want to do it, you have to prove that it affects your business significantly.
You already start realizing the thing. So, like, what shall I do with all of that? Let's first think about, should you comply at all? And let's read GDPR all together. First, the right of protection of personal data is not an absolute right. That's already a good start, right? Then the regulation does not apply to issues of protection of fundamental right and freedom. So, right, like, your rights of protection of personal data is not a fundamental right as well, such as activities concerning national security. In other words, if state wants data from you, forget about GDPR, at least for this data set, but you have other rules to comply. Just an example, maybe a couple of them. In Estonian reality, all telcos have provided API for national security policy, so they can simply query this data like your GPS location, all these your text messages and stuff as they want to. So it's not the case like you do some terrorist attack and just you realize that phone is with you, so they can somehow like understand you, just run to nearest telco office and say like, forget me and erase all my data, it wasn't me. That's not the case. Please remind them. And the next thing, like I was myself faced a couple of months ago when I went to bank and I wanted to adjust my limit for the Dev Club actually. And they said, oh, it's nice to see you again. I haven't been there for 4 years. I said, like, it's so good you come. There's 4A4 of questionnaire you have to fill manually, which has questions about who we are, what we do. Whenever we have people who are connected to public authorities in our organization, whenever we have foreigners, do we get money from outside? Lots of questions. Interestingly, looking at my transactions, they could find at least half of the answers. And interestingly, connected to all data sources we have right now, to the remaining half, around 90% could be answered like that. Like whenever we have people in board who are connected to public authorities, you just like, that's a public service, you can query that. So, and I said that to this lady, and I said like, and then remaining part, sorry, like GDPR, like I don't give a shit, I will not feel it. And she said, sorry, that's Anti-Money Laundering and Anti-Terrorist Act, you have to fill it. And that's it. So I had to fill it.
So is the data that you need to keep for the state regulated somehow?
Yes.
How do you know?
Like, if you don't know that, then your data is not regulated. So yeah, you can be relaxed. So even if you have to comply, for existing solutions, in case you can prove that making it GDPR compliant has a significant impact to your business, adjustment can be postponed with only one exception, consent. here I put postponed in quotes because actually it's not stated it can be postponed. That's my interpretation of GDPR, in the sense that in GDPR there is a self-renewing mechanism. It says that every 4 years all European Union countries should provide a report whenever they are GDPR compliant, what happens, what situations we have, data breaches and that kind of things, and what they think about improvement in GDPR. And after that, it can be more strict, or vice versa, like who knows. Like you've seen the statistics, like a lot of companies don't comply and they will not. So I suggest you strongly recommend start with consent. For the rest, if you can prove that it affects your business, you can say, that affects my business, because the idea of GDPR is not a lobby of IT companies who want to earn money and in doing some more work. It's about still people, and if you explain people why data is used, that's already a good start. But as I understand, for all new solutions, GDPR is by default and by design. So from IT perspective, GDPR is explanation. It's explaining and letting your users know what data is collected, why it's collected, and how it's collected and how it will be used. Help to show data, I don't know, make font bigger on profile or whatsoever, just say like, that's the data I have for you. Maybe just do it in a proactive manner, so people can review, because sometimes you actually need the correct data. And maybe you explain people like, I know you haven't updated the home address for 2 years, maybe it has been changed, and I have a gift for you. Maybe it will be delivered to our wrong address. Just explain people, okay, I use this data, that should be fixed, or at least review that. Export and import. With export, you have to do it. With import, it's even more interesting. If your competitors do export, that's a nice trick to do import first. So you can assume or just absorb the data. Like people say, I want to be transferred to another company. If you're one of the first guys who can collect this data and understand what has been wrong with this guy, or like whenever like he has been simply treated in a bad way, do that thing first. That really will help your business.
So are there like standard formats for it?
There are no standard formats, and that's again the trick. So it should be machine readable format. But it can be whatsoever. Like people can do, I don't know, CSVs, people can do XMLs, JSONs. But you like, you can ask someone to export the data, and you can expect that. And that is actually what happens to all telcos, because in telcos, a format is also not set. And it's not set for personal data. It's set for number exchange, but for the rest it's not set. So we can export that, but no other telcos can consume all my, how many time I have used, like whenever I have used the internet and that kind of thing, services. That is not fixed in a format. So you can say, I want to switch my number, and I want this subscription, and you have no idea whenever this subscription or something similar has been used in another one. So a format is not set.
So
but
is import in the GDPR?
Import is really currently stated as highly voluntary.
Okay, but do you expect it becoming not that voluntary?
Well, there are so many areas of business, and making it mandatory means that you have to define the format. Yeah. And defining the format for all areas of business is something will never happen, or at least will not happen until we still write the code. Which never happens. So it means that I don't believe that import will become mandatory, but export is.
But actually, I think the wording is that somewhere that if there is industry standard, then that has to be used.
Yeah.
And also from the import and export side, as it also says that a person can ask one provider to export the data or directly transfer it to another provider.
Yes.
So basically, to that work, it also means that perhaps there needs to be some kind of understanding with the import side.
Is that part optional as well?
Currently, it's optional. Still,
It's like so much like the Pirates of Caribbean question about Pirates Code.
Yeah.
So
I mean, like,
it's not actually code. It's more like what it was, framework.
Guideline.
So if there's an industry standard, you're encouraged to use that, but you don't have to.
You're encouraged, but you don't have to.
Okay.
And forget it. Forget it. Here I don't only mean right to be forgotten. I also mean that if you realize during your coding that you don't need this data anymore, delete it. Don't store it. I know lots of companies store data because they can. Because data storage is relatively cheap. Please try to avoid that and do all this data, I don't know, encryption or pseudonymization or physical deletion or soft deletion as like by design of your architecture. So just implement that straight away.
Then it kind of reduces your machine learning capabilities to a great deal.
You can still have something for your machine learning without having private data, like personal data. Like, do you need my name in order to predict my behavior? I hope not.
No. Not really.
That's the point.
But maybe zip code.
Zip code is not a personal data, like if it's not with all details which identify me. Because in this zip code there are lots of people living. So you can say like zip code count +1 in your database, in your machine learning, that kind of things. It's not personal anymore.
But in part that is also the point they're trying to make, is that you don't use machine learning on a lot of data like this.
Now we can still use machine data, but it doesn't mean that I store all the data just because I can. As I said, like you just think about the data which provides any kind of input for machine learning. As I said, like my phone number, does it provide the input for machine learning?
Yeah. So
my name?
It is about the personal data not being used for machine learning. So if you want to, so other data that doesn't identify you can use it anyway. But it is firstly about being transparent about how this data is being used, allowing you to or requiring you to consent and allowing you to withdraw consent for using that data in these kind of decision engines. And in that sense, if that data isn't strictly required anymore, you have to delete it. If, however, you do machine learning on this and the user has consented to their use of their personal data in that, then of course you have a reason to use the data and you can therefore keep it. You also have consent for it.
Yeah.
If the user withdraws consent, you will have to delete it.
Yeah.
You can no longer use that data for machine learning.
Yes. So good start, not from GDPR, from another presentation, but I really like it. Do your data inventory first. Just understand what data you use and understand the data from a data flow perspective. So it means like, okay, I use this data, where it's get collected. It also will help you to understand where you put your consent into. Not only stored. And then data processing principles basically do a guidelines or blueprints for your engineers. Once they face something which should apply to GDPR, they know how to treat it. Like for example, if you want to collect middle name, which comes to personal data, with all this assembly of data, so they know that on right to be forgotten, they have to delete it as well. So there's guideline blueprint for your engineers. We have one officer here, and there's lots of people saying, oh, I also need an officer. Wyman does have any officer?
Yes.
Yes. He's not with us anymore? Ah, not right now.
He had to be at a GDPR related.
Cool. So DPO stands for Data Protection Officer. Security and GDPR expert reporting to the board, escalating possible breaches and helping to prevent them. Just really short explanation what DPO is. Interestingly, still not accountable, e.g. not financially responsible for failures. It's just like this, I'm doing my best, man, and now just, if it happened, then it just happened.
That's usual. I mean, if your production server goes down, you do not forward your losses to the engineering team, right? Or
Like yes, and this guy is also expert. Like does the same. Like
The board is responsible.
the board is responsible for everything, right? So you need it actually in two cases: if you're a public authority, except courts, and your large-scale or sensitive data processing is your core business, and it can be outsourced. So what I really like about this stuff is ex-Scrum Masters or Agile coaches or whatsoever, starting from 26, will be certified DPOs and provide their services to lots of companies. So if you want to be successful next month, do it right now. I don't know, get your DPO training and you can be rich for the next something hyped. Large scale, like really nice wording in GDPR. I really like that. And if you read what large scale is, let's read it all together. Like considerable amount of personal data on regional, national, supranational level, and which could affect a large number of data subjects and which are likely to result in high risk. That's the definition when you need a GDPR. A DPO. And then like it's found like sounds really precise, right? Like just, oh, I need this guy. Interestingly, that's already third version of when you need a DPO. First version was if your company is more than 250 people. Just like, okay, but if out of these people we have only 2 mentally disabled persons who are like only installing Windows and that's it, like should I have DPO? Sounds strange, right? Then we said, okay, if your budget is more than some, and then they said, okay, like in lots of companies, it's really hard to distinguish between IT budget and overall budget, so they come to that. So whenever you need a DPO or not, it's you to decide. We have one here. Zone E basically has this large amount of like sensitive data.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, that kind of things. And then again, like for example, you have a sex shop, which is really popular, for example, here in Estonia. They acting on national level, right? Correct. So they are popular, they're processing lots of data, correct? Correct. If data got leaked, that's a high risk, right? You don't want this data to be leaked, most probably. So do these guys need DPO? I don't know. And the question is like, who will be checking all of that? Like who will say, who is the final committee who says like, actually you need that?
I mean, I think it would be rather, you know, post-mortem. When she goes down, then, oh, you didn't have the DPO, that's why.
The DPO is like just, I know financial responsible, like that's not because of me. And then...
DPO is saying, I told you.
I told you, yes. So European Data Protection Board is already established. People are working hard, doing something. Every state should have at least one supervisory authority. So basically, someone who will be in charge of controlling GDPR compliance. Unfortunately, in Estonia, officially this is not the case yet, because Estonian interpretation of GDPR is not confirmed, and that's why everyone is so anxious about that, because no one knows, like most probably it will be Andmekaitse, like this, but like who in person will be responsible for that, actually it will heavily affect how things will be interpreted. And that's a big question whenever they are highly qualified, whenever certified DPOs or not certified DPOs, no one knows. Yeah.
Because what is that? Might possibly become the one to be performed that they thought they are going to have certified everything, and then because they are also the organization who has all of their salary lists publicly on the website, everybody capable got hired off their lists, so they found that oops, we don't have any capacity to certify anybody, and now we must start hiring ourselves. So they are in a deep
So I was talking to big companies, and they said like they are really concerned, I would say, who will be in charge of checking GDPR, because if these people are smart, then most probably state will not be able to pay good money, and as you said, their salary is publicly available, you can simply buy them over, and if these people are not smart enough, then whatsoever could happen. Talking about certification, yes, process is not here in place, but these public authorities should do this process. Voluntary and available via process that is transparent. And nevertheless, fines already in place. As you know, they're quite big, up to 4% of annual turnover or 20 million, whichever is bigger. So like for small companies, it means bankrupt. Even for big companies, it can be quite some. So I know, like, we don't know who will be deciding on that, right? So it just like that is a thing which makes people scary. But here is one more asterisk. What it means? Business opportunity, like it means this time welcome to Estonia. There are only two countries mentioned by name in GDPR, Denmark and Estonia. In Denmark, GDPR non-compliance means criminal case. In Estonia, the fine is imposed by supervisory authority in the framework of misdemeanor procedure. Therefore, the competent national court should take into account the recommendation by the supervisory authority in changing the fine. So it means like European Union wants us to imply these fines, but they cannot force that. And talking about how small Estonia is. I did this presentation 2 months ago. The next week I did, actually they made the law, like now these fines are in place in Estonia as well. So we're not so special any longer, unfortunately. So if you breach GDPR, you're fucked. You cannot simply send your DPO just clean the streets because of this misdemeanor stuff. So like, and you still cannot ask money from them. That's bad. So yeah. And now talking about you, my Russian friend. So you say, I don't care, my site is in Russia, and I have 2 news for you, and both are bad. GDPR is applied to any site services able to serve EU residents. It means, even if you have geo or IP blocking, that kind of things, if I come to Russia, I open the site, or I order goods, that site should be GDPR compliant if it collects my data. And the next question, like, what do you do with Russians if you don't comply? And now, the second news is the board or supervisory authority has the right to block, ban services providers, regions, or whole countries if they don't apply. And that's the cruel reality. So that actually can raise sanctions on a brand new level. So, what is a little bit, I would say, scary thing, because again, it also relies on people who make choices, who to ban and how to ban. And you know, in Russia, I will finish that. In Russia, you have to store all sensitive or personal data of Russian citizens and Russian servers. Now GDPR in place. Now in America, if you serve national defense companies, data should be only stored in America and should be processed by only people with US citizenships who comply with all these rules. So with all of that, Internet, which used to be wide and open, more and more comes or reflects the political map as it is right now.
Like an US version of the GDPR?
US sites should comply. That's a point, but they should.
Do they have their own legislation?
No, they comply to this general one.
And when you looked at the Facebook, Zuckerberg's testimony, then on his memos was specially a line, don't mention we are GDPR compliant. Because otherwise the Congress may get the idea, okay, if Facebook is compliant, maybe we should enforce that to others.
But for example, Amazon is already GDPR compliant. And
exactly, there is actually all peaks are, I think, compliant. We were on that's a TPO meetup. There was a guy from eBay who described their project that they have been running for like, I don't know, more than 2 years. They just got basically budget for whatever you need and just fucking do it. So they got everything together, looked at the budget, and came out with a name for the project, which was Giant. So there is a full organizational structure of people dealing with GDPR in eBay. So the guy who was sent to Estonia was like, I think 3 levels down. So
does that basically mean, like the last thing, does it basically mean that in a few months, whole of China is now just banned, like everything, like Alibaba and AliExpress?
Yeah, they can say so. Like that's the point.
That's a funny thing. You know what happened with Telegram Messenger in Russia? Like the Russian government tried to ban it. But as it is hosted on Google Cloud and Amazon, they basically started to ban Amazon and Google IPs. So basically it caused outage of very random services, including like cashier machines and like financial services, etc., all over the Russia. But like still Telegram was able to, you know, like operate.
So basically like...
so basically this means the very same thing. If authority decides to ban a service that is not compliant, that is hosted in the cloud, where everything else is hosted too, for example Amazon, they basically will face the same problem as the Russian government did.
I think one thing about
like we come to that. I just comment that, and that's an interesting thing about the solidarity principle, which is also in GDPR. So the fact whenever you are compliant or not depend on compliant or third parties you are using, and their third parties they are using, and their third parties, like this Clojure, like if you know this programming language, it really reminds me of that. So if you're not compliant, then Amazon is not compliant. So like it's like for Amazon, it's for them it's more easy simply to cut you off and just say like, we don't know this guy, we forgot, right to be forgotten for that stuff.
But then it needs to be like requested
yes.
from Amazon. It needs to be proven to Amazon. Okay,
yes.
this guy is not compliant.
Yes, that's the point. So it's basically they don't ban IPs. They go to Amazon and say like, please ban this guy, and that's it.
But again, also, if it's like fairly big customer for Amazon and Amazon is making enough money out of this customer, then it becomes like a kind of...
Now when lawyers come in place and when lawyers fight, and let's see how it goes. But the most important question of today's discussion, should kittens comply? Now raise your hands who thinks kittens should comply. I like thought about that, or like mentioned that in the really beginning.
Depends if they are professional kittens.
Let's come to it. Now, who thinks kittens should comply? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good. No. They shouldn't. GDPR is only for natural persons, people, and it's still safe to use their pictures as they have no right to be forgotten.
Breeding data for like livestock and stuff like that, which is like really fine, you know, like the breeding pools or the genealogy data and all the pictures, that's fine.
Like from kittens, yes. From people, no, because DNA is biometrical data and can be identified by...
there are sites with large databases of animals.
Yeah, so they should not be GDPR compliant. That's totally fine. And I really encourage you, in your next presentation, don't use pictures of persons, because as you see, it becomes more and more complicated. So use kittens, but please don't use monkeys. Because, Shutterstock, for example, like one of the biggest stock agencies, bans unnatural photos of apes and monkeys, because these beings can be affected or offended by that. So it's PETA, this famous PETA organization, also proved that they don't like to see that kind of pictures. Kittens are still fine. Dogs are still fine. Please use them.
Even if they were tools, like on the picture.
Yes. Kittens with tools are still fine, but all these chimpanzees, monkeys, apes are not fine. Like if they are not in natural conditions. So if they're simply, I don't know, somewhere on the trees, still fine. If they are doing something like that, like people are interested what happens to this Planet of Apes movie. because they are not really natural conditions for apes, right? So let's see how it goes. But that's a different story. As you still have to comply, be like Topia, as we are. Hire engineers, not kittens. We're hiring engineers. And that's it. So there are
one thing about Amazon and other of these US companies. There is in GDPR the point that if the information is transferred outside the European Union or European economy or whatever, then there needs to be either some kind of larger scale agreement or typical contract clauses implemented in these contracts, or the external party needs to be part of EU-US privacy shield named kind of program or concept, and basically all of the big guys are, and when you are doing anything with these big ones, including MailChimp but also AWS and others, they do have special data processing clauses, special agreements, so you can basically go log into your AWS and you can get a PDF file that you can print out that has already some vice president of something or other signed it. You sign it, you scan it and upload to Amazon, and it's considered that now you have contractual relationship to AWS, and they are confirming that they are working to these the same European standards. They are not working to US law, but they are working with you to these standards. So MailChimp, everything, just if you're using something and keeping data, you must do that. And also one thing which I think is very important, that there is the two roles, the data controller, the owner of the data, and data processor. And while as a zone, I'm seeing that we are very often that in the data processor role. I've been talking also to different kind of development and ops agencies and so on, especially as we are also related to ops here a lot. Then the ops probably is also the processor of data, because your people who are accessing the system must be compliant to the rules provided by the data controller. Then you probably need to make sure that your contractual terms also apply that. And also because they must be diligent in choosing you, then you should be able to prove that you are either following some information security management system or doing something. So
as I said, with solidarity principle. So like whole chain, whole chain should be GDPR compliant. If someone is not, then whole chain is not.
And it's often very difficult to not be a processor when you are dealing with live systems and helping to keep them up. So it basically binds us all together. So we should be very much trying to help each other.
I have a question about the Shutterstock models who already converted and sold their pictures. Are they liable to recall all the pictures
no.
that are made
no.
back?
Because we have special contract, they give exclusive rights to photographer.
But if you have made the pictures and you have not signed with us the contracts, then pay up.
No, it's public event, so he can do still. Let's do one. So.
Yeah, you will not make photo of.
We only picture people who signed the paper.
Not really, but I mean, the point again is that's a public event, but you can implement these rights, so we can delete photo of you if you don't want. Yeah, we want to forget you and forgive you for something, and yeah.
So on the banning aspect, Russia already has a similar thing,
Yeah.
How are they implementing it? How are they banning the sites?
So they basically to telcos, ISPs. So they said like ISPs, they have API, they send bunch of IPs, and then automatic base simply ban them. ISPs.
It's very inefficient to say.
As you see.
Everybody's talking about this GDPR now, but has there been in some sort of a business area where similar laws have been there before, or regulations, or not laws? Or let's put it this way: is there something even worse somewhere than GDPR?
As I said, like there are things which are worse than GDPR, but in this case you shouldn't be GDPR compliant. Like as I said, for telcos, for banking, for PCI compliance. PCI compliance is worse than that.
But they have their stuff like already in place, so they don't get this huge.
I like how it automatically became a bad thing.
Like you see, I've been asked this question actually. Like whenever GDPR is a good or bad thing, from my understanding, and my answer would be like definitely from a user perspective. Let's start from that. That's a good thing. Like we have control over data. Then from IT perspective, it might be a good thing because it actually requires some discipline. Like you do stuff in a proper manner. But then we come to important stuff. Discipline comes with money, and where enterprise takes money if not from end users. Now we come to this infinite loop of question: whenever GDPR is good enough, so you pay money for that. And this something I cannot answer. Is it good enough so you pay money for that?
I think it's so vague that you can't really, from the end user perspective. Can you say it's so good that I'm about to pay money for it?
My concern is kind of half-assed right now.
Yes.
Well, from an end user side, I'd like to compare it to the Blendamed ad, which was that there were 5 guys sitting, and there was a question of who is paying for the box of the toothpaste. And 4 guys raised their hands, and the 5th guy said that these guys are paying.
Yeah.
So basically, from the consumer side, it's like that. From the business side, I've seen, especially looking at wider picture than just personal data, on the larger security questions. I've been raising the questions with some of my clients about their security, and they have been telling that, sorry, marketing, the management won't think about that. And now they're coming back to the same questions like eBay 2 years ago, telling that, Peter, what? The management said that take whatever money and just make it happen. So it is kind of a way to also make them think deeper and make I've seen in our organization that we have come to much deeper think about things we are doing. We may be doing things that are very good. For example, we did one very simple thing on hosting side to allow automatically adding live access logs to all of our customers. We push it live, we wrote a blog post, and then we started thinking, until now, logs contain personal data, IP addresses and times and so on. Until now, we were the controller of this data. So we were responsible that nobody got access to data. And now we threw it out to customers' territory, to the web servers, to the part of the web servers that is accessible if the server is compromised. So we kind of forced personal data on our users in environments we know that are running not updated systems, and basically we made more data vulnerable. Was it a wise choice? Or another one, we thought that, okay, we have the log file of bounces of emails sent out of the web server. Should we just make it easily available to everybody? And we came to the question, the same sex shop question. What if it is some kind of sensitive information, and we are just pushing it out to the customer's territory and saying that, do something about the data, you are the father. And I said, no, okay, we should kind of make a thing. So it has made us, even after we have been over a year working towards ISO 27K, to be in a way of easily telling how we are compliant to customers. We are daily finding the situations where we are sitting together deciding, and next week we're saying, oh no, that wasn't a good idea, it turned out bad again. So there is so much to learn from that. So I'm personally feeling that GDPR is a total pain in arse, but it's it's like...
No pain, no gain, that's what I mean.
No pain, yes, good point.
If nothing else, at least you will get more.
Yeah. The pain probably also, if your pain gets very sharp, you get at least rid of your hemorrhoids.
That was too personal data, I would say.
Right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Kirill. That's for you.
How do you know my size? That's a personal stuff.
Leave me here, you were never good enough. Won't change a thing now, there was never trust. Don't you say a word, cause I've heard it all. You were just pain when you felt it all. Oh. Something tells me that I won't miss it.